The Cold War wasn't just a political standoff. It led to multiple conflicts worldwide. It was a battle of ideologies between the United States and its allies, promoting capitalism and democracy, against the Soviet Union and its allies, pushing for communism. But this war wasn't fought on traditional battlefields. Instead, it spread through proxy wars, military interventions, and global crises that shaped modern history. Let's explore the key conflicts that defined this global struggle. The Korean War, 1950-1953, the first major conflict. After World War II, Korea was divided at the 38th parallel. The Soviet Union supported the North, while the United States backed the South. In June 1950, North Korea launched a full-scale invasion of South Korea, hoping to unite the country under communism. Fearing the spread of communism, the United Nations, led by the US, intervened and pushed the North Koreans back. However, China, a newly established communist power, sent troops to aid North Korea. The war turned into a bloody stalemate, with millions of casualties. By 1953, both sides had signed an armistice agreement, but Korea had remained divided. Even today, North and South Korea remain hostile, a legacy of this Cold War conflict. The Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975. America's longest war. Vietnam became another major battleground of the Cold War. After World War II, Vietnam was divided. North Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh, was supported by the Soviet Union and China. South Vietnam was backed by the US, aiming to stop the spread of communism. The US believed in the domino theory, the idea that if one country fell to communism, others in the region would follow. As a result, the US sent hundreds of thousands of troops to Vietnam. However, the war was different from traditional battles. Guerrilla warfare, dense jungles, and ambush tactics made the war incredibly difficult for American forces. Despite their military strength, the US faced massive anti-war protests at home. In 1973, the US withdrew its troops, and by 1975, North Vietnam took over South Vietnam, uniting the country under communist rule. This war deeply affected American foreign policy and changed public perception of war forever. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. The closest we came to nuclear war. In October 1962, the US discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. This led to 13 days of extreme tension, where the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. The US imposed a naval blockade around Cuba, preventing Soviet ships from delivering more missiles. Both the US and Soviet Union threatened military action, leading to fears of a nuclear disaster. Finally, diplomacy prevailed. The Soviet Union agreed to remove its missiles from Cuba, and in return, the US secretly agreed to remove its missiles from Turkey. This event led to direct communication lines between the US and the Soviet Union to prevent such crises in the future. The Soviet-Afghan War, spanning from 1979 to 1989, became known as the Soviet Union's Vietnam. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to support its communist government against rising opposition forces. However, the US, along with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, secretly supported the Mujahideen, Afghan resistance fighters. These fighters used hit-and-run tactics, their knowledge of the terrain, and US-supplied weapons to weaken Soviet forces. The war dragged on for almost a decade, costing the Soviet Union billions of dollars and the lives of thousands of soldiers. In 1989, the Soviets withdrew in defeat, and the war contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union 2 years later. Interestingly, this war also played a role in shaping modern conflicts, as some Mujahideen fighters later became associated with terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. Other major Cold War conflicts. The Cold War wasn't just about direct wars, it also shaped global events in many ways. The Berlin Crisis in 1961 saw the Soviet Union build the Berlin Wall, dividing East and West Berlin. This wall became a symbol of oppression and Cold War divisions. The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 was a failed US-backed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba. The space race and arms race weren't direct wars, but the US and Soviet Union competed to develop nuclear weapons and space technology, leading to the first man on the moon in 1969. The Cold War ends in 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union. By the late 1980s, the Soviet economy was crumbling and people in Eastern Europe were demanding democracy. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, a powerful moment symbolizing the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. By 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved, ending the Cold War. The United States emerged as the world's dominant superpower, and a new world order began. Legacy of the Cold War. Even though the Cold War officially ended, its impact is still felt today. The US and Russia remain global rivals. North Korea is still isolated and hostile. Nuclear weapons continue to shape international politics. The Cold War changed the course of history, and its conflicts continue to influence world affairs. What do you think was the most important Cold War conflict? Let us know in the comments.